let's talk about some photography gear for safaris. First thing I want to do is just give you a quick couple of recommendations at different price points and then dive into what I just got back from using after 3 weeks in Tanzania in the Serengeti. First, price points. Budget 80D with the Sigma 150 to 600 is just about as good as you can get. Nikon side, D7200 with the Sigma 150 to 600, also very good. You could also go with the Nikon 200 to 500, but I think the Sigma 150 to 600 contemporary, this decent sized version, not the giant sport, is a great way to go. Exceptionally sharp lens, nicely weather sealed, and I've just been very, very happy with this lens. Step up from that, the 7D Mark II, or on the Nikon side, the D500, also paired with the same lens. Very good combination, great focusing. Step up from that on the Canon side, the 100 to 400 is just a fantastic lens. It is twice the cost of the Sigma. Is it 2 times as good? No, but it is certainly noticeably better. It is more travel friendly, great filter size, and it works really nicely with a 1.4x converter on cameras like the 80D, the 1DX Mark II, even out at the far range. Now Sigma sells a 1.4x converter as well that actually does better in some circumstances than the Canon. At some points when you get past that f8, the Canon will refuse to focus. The Sigma will still, but your results are a little bit less than perfect at those levels or those focal lengths and apertures. I'll have a complete list of everything I just ran through right down below. And at the very top of the list, of course, is something like the D5 or the 1DX Mark II, and again, the Canon 100 to 400 or the 1.2 or the 1.4 extender. You certainly can go with the longer primes, but there is a lot of variation, at least the safari that I ran into or was on, where sometimes animals would be amazingly close. And just being a fixed prime lens, you are very limited in your movements. You have to remain in the vehicle in most of these cases, and you have to remain on the roads in most of these cases. So having a variable focal length lens, although it might not be as sharp as one of those really nice primes, it's going to give you a little bit more flexibility. Actually, it's going to give you a lot more flexibility. So unless you've shot a lot with primes and you really know what you're doing, I really recommend something like the Sigma 150 to 600 or the Canon 100 to 400 or the Nikon 200 to 500. Those are all very good. Now on this trip that I was on, folks shot with the contemporary version, the sport version, the Canon 100 to 400, the Tamron 150 to 600, and honestly they're all quite similar. As I said, the Canon of course is sharper. The sport version of the Sigma is also sharper. That is a beast of a lens though, and unless you're really committed to carrying that around, I don't think it's that much better than this that it makes it worthwhile. This lens remains my perfect choice for those of us who are on a reasonable budget but needs a lot of focal length. 600 millimeters is really good. Now, let's talk about the gear I brought and how it worked for me. I kind of wanted to do a proof of concept. How well does the new Sigma adapter give you focal lengths like this built for Canon or Nikon on something like the Sony? And the answer is with the A6300, surprisingly well. I was quite impressed with the speed, the accuracy, and the consistency of focus. So what I have here is the Sony A6300, the Sigma MC11 adapter, and a Canon mount Sigma 150 to 600 contemporary. This combination works quite well. You can even throw in the 1.4 extender, Sigma or Canon. I shot with both of those over multiple days, and you have a massive amount of range, and focus is quite good. Not perfect, certainly not on level of something like a 7D Mark II or the D500 as far as consistency and speed, but still very good, and I was happy with it 95% of the time. I cannot say the same when I used this setup with my Sony a7R II. So using the Sigma adapter, the Sigma 150 to 600 on the a7R II, performance was less than stellar. It worked, but there were some times where there was a lot of hunting, a lot of confusion, and one whole day, it just didn't work at all. Multiple resets, battery out, battery in, stuff like that. So, if you're a Sony shooter and you're about to go on a safari, you don't necessarily need to rent a DSLR to go along with you. You can have good results with the A6300 and the Sigma adapter. I didn't try a Metabones adapter. I suspect it's quite good as well, but I really like using the Sigma with the Sigma. I definitely feel like I get better results. I saw that on my Cuba trip with a 50mm and the Sigma. But that's a lot of focal length range that you can get with a non-Sony lens, and that works quite well. Very happy with, of course, the A6300. Its quality, its burst rate for those moments. Now, I think a lot of you, when you picture safaris, you picture a lot of action, a lot of fast cat action. And the truth of that is there's a very small amount of that. There's a lot of cats laying in shade, cats laying across branches, cats yawning. And actually at that 11 frames a second, something like a cat yawning is really nice because you can just throw a burst in there and pick that perfect moment where all the teeth are showing and the cat's not making quite a funny face that happens before or after a yawn. So having a little bit of a faster frame rate can be really nice for that. But as I said, there's a lot of slower movements and times, and so you don't need these really fast cameras all the time. So the Sony a7R II did quite well, except for that whole focusing issue with the longer lenses. Sometimes I use the Canon 24-70 on it. In general, I do recommend you bring at least two bodies, or I should say two bodies. You probably don't need to bring more than that. A crop sensor with a long focal length is very good, especially if it's a crop sensor that's going to give you a little bit of a faster burst rate, like the D500 or the 7D Mark II. Or the ADD, the new ADD from Canon will do quite well as also. And then if you have a full frame camera, that's nice too, and have a slightly wider focal length. As I said, there are times where the animals get amazingly close. If you're forced to switch lenses because you only have one, you might miss some cool shots. Whereas if you have a wider angle lens on your backup camera or your second body, I don't know what you want to call it if you bring along two, then you can get those shots. Another thing to think about is these are harsh conditions for cameras. We had multiple cameras fail for various reasons. In fact, both of the cameras that failed were quite old. They were brought along as backup bodies, but in both cases, they just one, the shutter mechanism just gave up, and in the other, it's not clear. It was an electronic issue that just basically shut the camera down. It didn't work anymore. So you don't want to go on a trip of a lifetime like these safaris are and have something happen to your one camera you bring and be left with just something like a cell phone. You can take pictures with this. I'll talk about this in a second, but it's certainly not going to be those amazing National Geographic shots that you might get with longer lenses. So, two cameras at least, a range of lenses from your kind of wider angle to your, of course, telephoto. Other gear I brought. Well, let's talk about this. This is the LG G5. Now, it's been out for a little while, but I was really curious because it's got two lenses. This is rumored to be coming in newer cameras, including the iPhone 7. We've got a very wide-angle GoPro-like lens, and we have a more narrow field of view lens. It was a lot of fun to be able to choose between those. Honestly, if you've watched other videos of mine, you know I'm not a huge fan of very wide angle for just wide angle sake. I think a lot of times the landscape can get just lost in a wide angle. Your viewer doesn't know what your subject is. But there are times where it's a lot of fun, and it was certainly neat to be able to switch back and forth. Image quality, I'm really happy with these LGs, not only because of image quality and video quality, but also the control built in. I've talked about that in other videos. I'll link if you want to hear more about that down below. I also love the size of the LG G5. It is just about a perfect size for me. The LG V10 is another phone that I've used. That's actually right here. I didn't bring it on the trip. Oh, I did bring it, but I didn't use it. It's backup. I bring backups of pretty much anything. I don't love its size. I also love its camera and quality, but its size is starting to get a little big for me. That's a personal issue, though. We don't have to talk more about that. This is a fun gadget that I can't quite figure out yet if it's just a toy or if it's a little bit more than that. This is one of those 360 cameras. This is the one made by LG. I decided to take this one along because it came in a nice little bundle with the LG G5. Very cool. I shot a 360 balloon video. It's on my Facebook page. I'll link to it right down below. That is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Everybody I showed it to literally gasped and was like, that's so cool. So that's very fun. Will it stick around? I don't know, but this thing's only 200 bucks and it does a pretty darn good job. I'm a little frustrated now though because I can't seem to get seamless 360 video up to YouTube working correctly. It has a funky seam in it. I've only been able to get pictures up and video uploaded straight to Facebook through the app that they give you on the phone. So I'm a little frustrated about that, but it works very well. It's got decent battery life. You throw a little micro SD card in, and being able to look around and relive my balloon flight over the Serengeti at dawn with this is pretty amazing. Now, I've looked at some other people side by side who've done side by side testings with the LG and the 360 from Samsung, the Samsung Gear, I think it's called. The Samsung Gear does look better. I haven't put this side by side with the Ricoh Theta, so I don't know there. But I don't think this is the best of them, but it's cheap and it's quite good. Also brought along one of these little RAV Power USB bricks. Did I say there will be links to everything I'm talking about down below? This is great. For me, using my Sony cameras, I can charge them, and of course all of my phones and gadgets I bring along as well. That works out really nicely. A selfie stick. Now, you may have just lost all respect for me and you might want to stop watching, but listen to this. You put the 360 camera on the end of the selfie stick and it does some amazing. You go watch that 360 video of the balloon ride, you don't see the selfie stick. Somehow it's right at that seam. I don't know if it knows or I just lucked out, but it just seems like hovering just outside the balloon is this camera that's watching us. And it works really nicely for that. When I use the 360 camera with my hand is gigantic. You can tell whether or not I've cleaned under my thumbnail recently. So if you're going to shoot with a 360 camera, a selfie camera is very, very nice. I'm glad I brought it. I like this one. I bought it off Amazon. I like this is a Fuge Tech. I like this one because it's got a tripod socket at the bottom, and that allows me to put this little mini tripod. I've had this thing for probably about 15 years. This is the Ultra Pod. So it can actually be a tripod for small things like cameras, like the cell phones, like 360. And when I was feeling very goofy, I took my Mi Photo, which I did bring along, I'll talk more about in a second. This converts to a monopod, so I stuck the two together and got insane. I'll have to dig through my footage and find the ones where I did insanely long selfie stick, just because, you know, sometimes I like to amuse myself. I did bring a tripod. You never use it in the vehicles or for the safaris because you've got bean bags in there, but there was opportunities to shoot the stars, and I said I'm not going to go to Africa and not have a tripod, even though I literally had to leave some pairs of underwear and socks behind. I was okay with that. I'd rather have a tripod than clean underwear if they're beautiful stars. We never had an amazing star opportunity, but we did have some cool shots. I'll link those down below too. You can follow me on Instagram and see all of this stuff as it goes up over the next couple of weeks. I was there not only to take pictures, but video so that I could produce the vlogs, of which some have already been posted by this time. So if you would like to see what I saw in Africa on this Thompson Safari Mackay photography trip, you should go look for those down below and I'll link them at the end. This is the Zoontech Crane Gimbal. I've tried out a lot of different ones of these, the Beholder, the iCan, and at least one other that I can't remember right now. I use this under the GH4, which is I'm using to film right now. Fantastic. This is the same company that made the one I reviewed a couple of months ago for the smartphones, the $250 one. This one's more expensive. I think it's $600, but it is without a doubt the easiest to balance, the easiest to set up and get going, and you've got a little joystick here that allows you to do some up and down motion and left right. Battery life would last for me about a day. It takes these gigantic looking AA batteries. Very, very happy with this. The only thing I wish is that it had a quick release plate. I might look at trying to add one myself. I'm pretty sure I can get it to still balance because I could still get the GH4 to balance even when it had heavier mic stuff on top that we'll talk about in a minute. But just when you're walking, if you want footage while you're walking or driving, you need one of these devices, and it can make your shaky footage exceptionally smooth and really just kind of ups the production quality. And to be able to get one of those now in that small compact form, it came with spare batteries, it comes in a nice little kind of Pelican type case. I think they're about $600, $700. It's sweet, and if you're doing a lot of video, you should do that. The other thing I tried for the first time on this trip that I was really happy with is the Video Micro. This is the little Rode mic. It's tiny, it's got that little dead cat on it. You pull that off, and that's all there is to it. It's quite small. It's very affordable. I think it's $60. You know, we had the opportunity to charge batteries every night, and we could also keep them charged in the vehicle, but I didn't want to go with my big mic. One, because I didn't think I would be able to balance it on the Zune because it's too heavy, and on the crane, the gimbal. And two, I just didn't want to have to think about charging lots and lots of batteries. This is battery-less. It doesn't need any batteries. It runs off a little bit of power that is supplied by the mic jack on most cameras, and I am quite happy with the audio. Very good. Needed to be turned up a little bit more than usual. Usually I have it all the way down to 0 when I'm using mics like my Sennheiser wireless, and I did bring these as well too, but I stopped using them because, again, I didn't have to want to worry about batteries so much, and that just worked and worked really well. Oh, before we get too far else into video, let me tell you about the other lens I brought. This is the newish 70-300 Sony lens, the G series. Ooh, this is a sharp lens. So I shot with this on the A7R and the A6300, both. That 70-300 range, you know, I was thinking about saying if you're going on a very budget trip, you could get away with like a 55-250 or a 70-300 lens on a crop sensor camera. You will be happy with some of your shots. But being able to go all the way to 600 with something like the Sigma really makes a difference and allows you to get those shots that when you come home make you go, wow, I was really there, and not just kind of far away. But I wanted to see how this performed, and it is an exceptionally sharp lens. It's a little hefty, and of course it is not cheap, but it is nice to see Sony trying to get out more lenses that give us more focal length range. What we need now from Sony is a 100-400 that doesn't completely break the bank. That would then put the A6300 in range with all these other DSLR options that we have out there. Certainly, as I said, the Sigma adapter is good, but it's not as good as native focusing. So keep that in mind. For video though, I took along a bunch of different cameras, the A6300, the A7R II, and the GH4. Most of the time recording myself, the 12-35 f2.8 lens was on the GH4. Very happy with that setup. When I needed to record longer distances, the Lumix 100-300 lens. Very happy with this as well. I have some fantastic looking 4K footage set up with this out at 300 with the GH4. Now, if you think about it, the 4K, you got a 2x crop factor, so that makes it a 600mm lens as well, and it's fantastic. The only thing you really have to watch out for at that focal length is vibration. Certainly small movements in the vehicle make it very difficult, so you want to be very steady when you're using that, and I was happy with it. I think that's everything. The only other thing to mention is I shot a boatload of video, and so having drives, I had a 1 terabyte and a 2 terabyte. I shot just over a terabyte of footage and photos over the 3 weeks that I was there. That's longer than most people go on safari. I was actually teaching, if you haven't followed along, on 2 different trips. But so you won't be creating as much, but please make sure you have a strong backup system in place. As you have spent time and energy and money to get there, you want to make sure that you are protecting these images as you take them. The Western Digital, the Seagates, this is a Transcend, more rugged drive. They're all great, 1 terabyte, 2 terabytes. Don't be cheap with things like that. Bring those along. And bring along plenty of memory cards too. You should not have to format or reuse any of the memory cards while you're in country. So make sure you're bringing along enough. I personally would recommend 5 or 6 64 gigabyte cards. But it depends on how long you've been there. I carried all of this in this Mindshift bag. I've done a review of this. It remains a bag that makes me so happy. I feel like no compromises, and I can shove all that stuff in it and still fit it under the airplane seat, which makes me breathe a nice sigh of relief when I'm getting on the airplane, because even if the overhead bins have been taken, or if we're getting on a small bush plane, I don't have to worry about what's going to happen to my bag, and if they're going to try to pry it out of my hands, it will fit. And I've been very, very happy with this bag. It's comfortable, can hold a lot of weight, and it does it very nicely. I think that's everything that I wanted to say about what I brought. If I could have brought anything else, I would have liked to have brought a prime, but I was out of space and my weight limit was already pushing the limit. but a nice prime lens to photograph some of the interesting people, the Maasai, the Datoga, and the Serengeti area that we visited, along with the Hadza people. Again, if you want to see anything that I saw, just watch at the end. There's a link to the videos as I'm putting them up and editing them. If you've got any questions, you can leave a comment right down below. If you've been on safari, what worked for you? I'd love to hear that. If you go on safari, what would you like to see? And anything else you want to share? Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye. Oh yeah, thumbs up.